And I talked to her and she said, Mommy, I missed you. I said, I missed you too, baby. She goes, where's Daddy? What are you telling me?
Erika Kirk's wife is creeping me out. What the hell is with that blueberry budget thing? Why would you say that to your kids?
In the months following a prominent activist's unexpected death, his widow found herself controlling not just a grieving household, but a multi-million-dollar organization and the future of 2 young children. What should have been a time of private mourning instead became something else entirely, a period of escalating decisions that would eventually pit a mother against her late husband's family in a custody battle that raises uncomfortable questions about priorities, grief, and the care of vulnerable children. The story doesn't begin with lawyers or courtrooms. It begins with something smaller, something that often goes unnoticed in the shadow of adult disputes. A 3-year-old girl told her mother she wanted to leave. Children, researchers tell us, rarely fabricate discomfort. They lack the sophistication for that kind of deception. They cry when something is wrong. They cling to people who make them feel safe. They ask to stay with grandparents not out of manipulation, but out of genuine need. When this particular child began begging to live with her paternal grandparents, when her distress became vocal and repeated, the adults around her faced a choice about what to do with that information. Charlie's parents took their granddaughter's request seriously. They opened their home. The question of whether her younger brother might follow soon emerged as an undercurrent of family tension, but the immediate concern was clear. The child was struggling.
Why does Erika Kirk keep forgetting that she has children?
What are they going to threaten me with? Going to heaven sooner to be with my husband?
I think you could ask any mother this same question, and every mother is going to express concern about who's going to take care of the kids.
What no one anticipated was that this simple plea would unravel a much larger narrative, one that had been quietly forming in the weeks and months since Charlie's death. The widow, Erika Kirk, had a story about grief. She told it often and with visible emotion. She spoke of her daughter still crying for her father, of explaining heaven to a small child who couldn't comprehend permanence. She presented these moments with tears, with pauses heavy with feeling, with all the visible markers of a woman enduring profound loss. She positioned herself as a struggling widow, managing 2 children alone, carrying the weight of her family's future.
And I talked to her and she said, Mommy, I missed you. I said, I missed you too, baby. She goes, where's Daddy? What are you telling 3-year-old? She's 3. I said, baby, Daddy loves you so much. Don't you worry. He's on a work trip with Jesus, so he can afford your blueberry budget.
Audiences who heard this narrative recognized the performance of grief, but some began to notice a disconnect. The image Erika presented of a hands-on mother comforting her confused daughter clashed with what the public was beginning to observe. The daughter in these stories didn't seem comforted. She seemed confused. She seemed to be mourning someone who had been, to her, the primary source of daily care and affection. People began asking quietly, where was this mother in the daily work of parenting? What was her actual relationship to her children before the cameras, before the public telling of their pain? Insiders, speaking carefully and anonymously, suggested a different reality behind closed doors. The daughter cried all day asking for her father. The son was too young to know what was happening, and the woman presenting herself as a grieving mother seemed, to those who watched from closer vantage points, emotionally distant from the very children she now centered in her public narrative. But the complications ran deeper than parenting or emotional connection. They ran toward power and money. Years before Charlie's death, his parents had harbored concerns about Erika's priorities. They believed she cared more about wealth and influence than she cared about their son. These were old grievances, the kind families accumulate over time. Suspicions about motivations, about where someone's true allegiances lay. When Charlie died, these old concerns didn't disappear. Instead, they seemed to crystallize into something that felt like confirmation. Within weeks, Erika moved into a CEO role at Turning Point USA, the organization her husband had led. She began issuing financial directives. To observers watching from outside, it appeared premeditated, as if she had a plan in place, waiting for the moment she could enact it. The organization already had structure, governance, a board of trustees designed to manage decisions. Yet Erika moved swiftly into the center of power. making herself essential almost immediately. The timing raised questions, even among people sympathetic to her loss. Years earlier, a recorded argument between Erika and Charlie had surfaced publicly. They fought about money, specifically who controlled it. Erika insisted on managing finances, on signing checks, on holding the keys to their economic life. Charlie pushed back, wanting shared responsibility, wanting input into decisions that affected both of them.
If you are marrying a man that is not capable of completely and totally handling the finances, then you should not marry that man. Finances will break a marriage quicker than anything else, period.
But what if he checks all of the boxes? He just is horrible at money.
Fine.
And you're really good at money.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
When people rewatched this footage in the context of what came after, it read differently. It read like a window into something fundamental about how Erika approached power and control. The inheritance Charlie left behind was substantial, over $12 million. Enough that grief didn't require immediate action. Enough that a widow could take time away from work, could focus on her devastated children, could let herself actually process loss. But that's not what happened. Instead, Erika had embarked on what some observers called a grief tour. She appeared at events. She told her story. She positioned herself as the keeper of Charlie's legacy. She left the daily care of her children to nannies, while she moved through the world in designer clothing, her appearance carefully maintained, her image meticulously managed. Every moment seemed to become content. Every private devastation seemed to transform into public performance. When she launched a GoFundMe, requesting donations despite her substantial wealth, the response was sharp. People who had initially offered sympathy began asking harder questions. Millions of dollars came in from supporters who didn't know she didn't need them. The optics of that decision, the implication of financial need where none existed, sparked a shift in public sentiment. It was during this period that allegations began to circulate more seriously, not whispers or suspicions, but formal concerns. Nannies who worked in the household reportedly contacted Child Protective Services. Multiple contacts, multiple reports of what they characterized as neglect. The children, they suggested, were being left in their care not out of logistical necessity, but as a matter of habit. The mother seemed absent, not just physically, but emotionally. She didn't appear to know her own children, didn't seem invested in their daily lives, didn't demonstrate the instinctive knowledge that parents typically have of their own dependents. These allegations, if substantiated, would reframe everything, not as a woman struggling with grief, but as a woman who was, perhaps, never truly engaged with motherhood in the first place. There had been signs before Charlie, before marriage, before the children that appeared in her carefully curated family photos. There was a woman building a career, a woman with connections to powerful people, a woman whose father held ties to significant political figures, a woman whose rise in various circles seemed purposeful, strategic, always aimed at a particular destination. She had pursued multiple ventures, each one calibrated for visibility and influence. And then there was the revelation that would trouble people most. Erika admitted meeting Charlie wasn't accidental. Their connection had been intentional, deliberate.
Never forget the time I was in Israel with my husband, that was the second time, but the first time with my mother on a pilgrimage. And I was standing in the ticket line. And I remember looking behind me, and in the snake of the ticket line was a guy who looked very familiar. I had no idea who he was. And I told my mom, this guy looks so familiar. And as a typical mother, she said, go and say hi. No. We were late for our flight, and I'm not going to come off like a crazy person that's just weird. That ended up being Charlie. Nothing is by coincidence.
People who heard this admission began reframing the entire relationship. Had she targeted him? Had this marriage been another calculated move in a longer strategy? Her adoption work in Romania, through an organization called Romanian Angels, added another dimension to these questions. The orphanage had come under scrutiny over the years. There were allegations that Erika had failed to bond with children in her care, accusations that she prioritized the appearance of doing good work over actually caring for vulnerable kids. Rumors circulated about undocumented international placements, about children moved without proper oversight, about paperwork that didn't add up.
Apparently, she used to run an orphanage in Romania, and it was a Christian orphanage. And allegedly, a lot of kids went missing. A lot of kids who came into that orphanage went missing. With her ties to you-know-who, his ties to you-know-who, a lot of people are speculating that those kids were
None of it had been conclusively resolved, but it painted a pattern. A woman who seemed unable or unwilling to connect emotionally with children, yet who positioned herself at the center of narratives about rescuing and caring for them. When she later brought her own children into her home and seemed equally unable to connect with them, the pattern felt complete, not evidence, not proof, but a consistent shape appearing across different contexts. A woman who looked like she was nurturing vulnerable people, but who seemed fundamentally disconnected from the actual work of love. Charlie's parents noticed all of this. They collected information. They consulted lawyers. They prepared for something they hadn't expected to need to prepare for, a legal fight to protect their grandchildren from their own mother. Meanwhile, Erika's actions continued. She appeared publicly affectionate with other men shortly after her husband's death. She maintained her visibility, her schedule, her performance. She didn't seem to acknowledge the warning her own daughter had given her by asking to leave. She didn't adjust course or reconsider her priorities. She simply continued as she had been. The case that began with a 3-year-old's tears was becoming something far more serious. CPS allegations, formal custody proceedings, the possibility of legal testimony about patterns of neglect. If the allegations proved substantive, if courts heard from those who had direct knowledge of the children's daily experience, if the pieces of this larger narrative could be presented as a cohesive picture, Erika faced the very real possibility of losing custody of both her children. But more than that, she faced the consequence of choices made in the weeks following her husband's death. Choices about what mattered, choices about where her time would go, where her energy would flow, what she would prioritize in a moment when those priorities would be scrutinized and judged by people who loved the children she had brought into the world. The question facing the family, and potentially the courts, was no longer abstract. It was immediate and profound. Where did these children belong? Who could actually provide them what they needed? And what did it mean that a young girl had felt compelled to ask to leave her own mother's home? These aren't questions that have simple answers, but they're questions that the legal system will eventually be asked to address, and the answers will shape the rest of these children's lives.